This morning, my mind was going back when I first came to Melbourne. And that was a time, after a lot of struggle, I was able to buy a car. And I was going to work. So it was a T-junction or something like that. I didn't know anything. I just turned right. I didn't see the vehicle that was coming on the left-hand side. The next thing, I heard a bang. Thank God it's at the passenger side, not to the driver's side. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here today. So I was shattered. I got down, but I was more shattered because I looked at this figure, burly, hefty figure. He was coming right at me. I thought I could have got killed in that car rather than he came. He held my neck, and at that time I didn't know what to do. I said sorry, about 200 sorries I told him, and he grabbed me. But I think he felt a little bit. He had some sympathy for me. He dragged me and I said, "You must be new to this place, is it? You are new to driving?" I said, "I've been driving. Sri Lanka, that's something else. This is Australia. You don't know how to drive. You didn't see?" I said, I'm sorry. So he dragged me. Fortunately, he was nice enough to ring my insurance, and he said, "These things you got to do, be careful on the road, okay?" But he was so nice, and he gave me a cup of tea also. So now, car is immobilized. Can't take the car. I'm now walking back. Can't ring, no mobile those days to ring anybody. I was walking back to see my dear beloved wife. She said, "You're early from work." I said, "So," he said, where did you park the car?" I said, "Car has been towed." He said, "What happened?" This is what I tell you. You just, a lot of things in your mind, you must just concentrate on the road. I said, I was concentrating, I don't know what happened. Anyway, so what are you going to do? The following day, I planned to go somewhere, and I promised somebody. So my wife says, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'll take a cab and go." Taxi, what else? I didn't know anybody. I was just 1 or 2 weeks in the church. I'm not going to ask anybody. So anyway, I just was contemplating. Suddenly my phone rang. So I thought the insurance guys are ringing me. Took the phone. "Shan, how are you?" I said, "I'm fine." So my wife was looking at a distance. I said, "Are you really fine?" Because sometimes when things are going wrong, when people ask you, "I'm fine," we said, "We are fine." Then he repeated. He said, "Shan, you're on a holiday today. I've taken a leave." Then I said, "No, I just met with an accident." "Where's the car?" "Okay, so you don't have a car." The word I heard from the other side is, "Leave it with me." He kept the phone down. So my wife was telling, "Why don't you tell him that you need a car and everything? You're like that. You just nod your head and go. You just, if you need anything, speak to them and tell them your car." Of course, that's the main thing. I said, "What can I do? Can I ask him?" He's ringing me. Go and ask him for a car. 5 o'clock in the evening, somebody knocked at my door. And this person was outside. And he didn't talk to me anything. He gave the car key to me. And I said, "You're fine? You have a car?" "Fine." And I saw that tag. It was a new tag. So he just walked away. So then he parked the car in front. That was a new car, virtually 2 days old or something. The older car on the other side. So I thought he has given the wrong keys to me. So I went and, "You're giving me the wrong keys." He said, "No, you know how to drive these cars? Now this one?" I met with an accident yesterday. He's giving me a new car. I said, No, that's fine." He walked in. He didn't ask anything. Got into his car and went away. At that very moment in my life, I was going through some challenging times. I was questioning God. You come to church every day. Sometimes we are smiling outside, but you have got a big question. Is God still there? I was trying to make a decision on that day because I wanted to really get back, because I came in a multiple visa. I thought I will get back. I said, enough is enough. I am struggling here. But at that moment, my wife turned around and said, I was just a new Christian. My wife turned around and said, that is God. That is God. You know, sometimes you will not understand. God answers at the right time, at the appointed time. So the title of my message this morning is, it's a moment of divine favor. I know he showed me some unconditional, it was love. I mean, it's unusual. It was something called unusual love and an unusual kindness he showed to me. That's true. But God has prompted him to ring me. So in everything, God is in it. If somebody rings you for something, God is in it. God is in it. So sometimes I wonder, Pastor David rings me. Pastor David rings me. And I said, how? You know, last year in Sri Lanka, during my daughter's wedding time, suddenly at 2 o'clock here, this time, my phone was ringing and I said, Pastor David, he didn't say anything. I'm praying for you. He kept the phone. God knows what you and I are going through, and he will send the angels at the right time. So to this backdrop, I want to quickly run through Acts 28, 1 to 10. Just if you have the Bibles, you can look at it, otherwise online. On the screen. Once safely on shore, we found out the island was called Malta. The islanders showed us unusual kindness. They built a fire and welcomed us all because it was raining and cold. Paul gathered a pile of brushwood, and as he put it on fire, a viper driven out by the heat fastened itself onto his hand. When the islanders saw the snake hanging from his hand, they said to each other, this man must be a murderer. For though he escaped from the sea, the goddess justice had not allowed him to live. But Paul shook the snake off into the fire and suffered no ill effects. The people expected him to swell up or suddenly fall dead, but after waiting a long time and seeing nothing unusual happen to him, they changed their minds and said he was a god. There was an estate nearby that belonged to Publius, the chief official of the island. He welcomed us. This is Luke was writing, so he says, he welcomed us to his home and showed us generous hospitality for 3 days. His father was sick in bed, suffering from fever and dysentery. Paul went in to see him, and after prayer placed his hand on him and healed him. When this has happened, the rest of the sick on the island came and were cured, ready to sail. They furnished us with the supplies we needed. This story about Apostle Paul. Apostle Paul, you know, he was persecuting the church, and suddenly he changed sides. He was touched on the way to Damascus, and he was giving his life to God. He had given his life to God. So this Jews council, you know, they have framed some charges, some 3 charges. They said stirring up riots among the Jews, ringleader of the Nazarene group, and also profane against the temple. So desecrating the temple. So there were some charges. They wanted to get rid of him at any cost. So what? Apostle Paul is a smart guy. He's like Pastor David. You know, he studied law under Gamaliel. And he said, I'm a Roman citizen. Nobody can try me here. And as a result, they had to take him from Jerusalem to Rome to be tried under the Roman law. So what happened here is, now the journey, because they had to go a sea voyage, and they started in a place called Adriatium, that is in Caesarea, it's a port city in Caesarea, so it's somewhere closer to Jerusalem. and they decided to go, because they took 2 ships, and in fact, I want to cut it short. They took ships, because the first ship they took it is what happened was, at that time, the person, the centurion in charge of these, because Paul was going as a prisoner. So there were a centurion, an official in charge of the prisoners. So his name is Julius. So when they landed the first port, they thought there was another vessel was coming. And that vessel was coming from Alexandria in Egypt. It was going direct to Rome. So they thought this is the quickest way, and they got into that boat. But what happened later on, the boat on the way had a severe storm and smashed, and then the ship landed closer to a place called Malta. That's how this Malta comes in. Malta is an island 58 miles from Sicily. It was not big, 17 miles long and 9 miles in width. Malta means a place of refuge. Because there were 276 people in that ship. And what happened is, some of them has to swim to the shore. And some, like Paul would have, I think, there were some planks and everything, because the ship was battered, so they made use of the plank and go, because people like me who can't swim had to take the plank. People who can swim, like Pastor Andrew, would have gone straight. So they have gone, and what happened is, they reached this Malta, the island of Malta. Malta means a place of refuge. For the 276 people, it was indeed a place of refuge. Malta is derived from the Greek word meli. Meli is honey. And some of the translations says melita, because honey is grown, produced at a vast scale but not now. Now, of course, it's a citrus and potatoes and other things. So this was at that time. So this morning, the first thing I wanted to talk to you is, unusual kindness is a divine act. Verse 1 says, once safely on shore, we found out that the island was called Malta. So these guys, because they saw at a distance, some of them saw it's a seashore, they were not sure, but somewhere they landed in this island. And in the biblical times, it was normal for shipwreck victims to either to be made slaves or put to death by whoever encounters them in the vicinity of the land. As such, Paul and the group would have expected a frosty reception from the Maltese people, but to their sheer amazement, the islanders showed them compassion and received them with open arms. You know, good old days, what happens is, when these ships, the impression they have is all these guys are prisoners and criminals, and they don't want, other people don't want to mingle with them. So what they do is they get rid of this guy, kill them. But if they can make use of this guy, because a feeble guy like me, they will think, okay, come, we will make them slave. That's what happened those days. So Paul and them was apprehensive. They would have thought, yes, the previous passage in 27, God has promised Paul that you will have a safe passage to Rome. But yet, sometimes God's, in our life, God has promised so many things, but it takes a while to come to pass, and we doubt God. So that's what's happening here. But in verse 2, Luke writes that the islanders showed us unusual kindness and also built a fire to welcome us all. Because it was raining and cold, it was a blessing in disguise to everyone. The ship they came was completely destroyed. Most of them had to jump into the water and swim to the shore. They probably had to throw everything away, except for the clothes on their backs. The people from the ship had nothing, and they were wet, cold, and in distress. This is indeed a divine act. This is because you don't know what would have happened in the ship. The ship would have been battered. They would have all died in that thing. But here what happens is, not only reach the place safely, but those people there showed them unusual kindness. They showed them something which not many people will do, because they were strangers. There were some people say they are barbarians. Barbarians, they said non-Greek speaking people are called barbarians. Barbarians in some way, they said non-civilized people. So they didn't know what to expect from these guys. But instead of, what happened was they were received very warmly by these guys. The Maltese Islanders treated these strangers and unexpected visitors as their neighbors because they had care, compassion, and concern for the well-being of these people. You and I have a responsibility to show care, love, and compassion on strangers whom God brings into your life and my life. What is unusual kindness? There's a significant difference between kindness and unusual kindness. Kindness is often good to people whom we know for a long time in our daily walk of life. We even inquire about their welfare, like, how are you? I am praying for you. That's the word kindness on a surface level. And it ends with that. We also kind to people if we know we can get something out of them for our benefits. We are nice to people because we know, I know sometimes when people are nice because they are trying to get something out of you. But unusual kindness is where we would show kindness to a stranger or perform an act of kindness which may not give us any benefits. It'll cost you time, energy, and resources, and you're doing it purely out of sincere love and compassion towards the person. Here you are portraying God's love and God's honor. God will honor you for your sacrifices. God tested me on this. Sometime back, late in the evening, I got a call. And he was known to me for some time, in the sense he was not closer to me, but he rang me, and he's a non-believer, and he said, can I come? Because I want prayers. It was around about late in the night, about 10:30. So, it was a house open to anything and everything. Now, of course, we have closed it. But those days, it's open anytime. You can come at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. That's how we did ministry. I'll tell you, sorry to say that to you. But he came at about 10:30. He sat with me. I prayed. He told me on the surface level what was happening in his life. And he said he had a case. Police came and they gave him a warrant. He didn't tell me anything else. He told me, do you know a lawyer? I said, yes. I introduced a lawyer. 2 days later, the lawyer ringing me and said, Shan, do you know this guy? I said, yes, otherwise I wouldn't have given this name to you. You know his case? I said, no. My good gracious, you have given me this case, I think finally I will also end up in jail, he said. But anyway, I thought this was a one-off thing, just a prayer and half an hour, everything is finished. Because sometimes we know we want to pray for people and that's it, that's the end of it. We don't want to journey with them. But God held me accountable. Can I tell you? I journeyed with him for 2 years. Journeyed with him for 2 years, not 2 hours, not 2 days, 2 years, whom I didn't know from Adam. And it ended, I have to be a witness in the courts, county courts. Pastor Andrew preached a sterling message last week on witnessing. I think God is doing far greater things through a pastor. So I had to be a witness. So this the final day came. My wife took a couple of weeks off. We wanted to do something. We felt pity on him. We know God hasn't brought him by accident to us. So we went the final day, the judgment day, and I had to get into the witness box. This was the second time I went into the witness box once, again another person, I don't want to mention here. But so I went, and when I got into before I got into the witness box, I saw the jurors, and they were taking the oaths. But the head of this jury took the oath on the Bible. It gave me a glimpse of hope. Anyway, I gave my witness, and I walked out of the box, and I was outside, and the lawyer and the barrister came to me. The lawyer is very close to me. I know him for more than 50 years. He knows my involvement. He said, "Shan, it is only your God can perform a miracle because the odds are heavily stacked against him." And a little bit he told me, for an offense like that, you will at least get 10 years. 2 years I have been running with him, and this is going to be the end. Anyway, I left it to God. The time came for the verdict. We all walked in. The judge asked head of jury, "What's your verdict?" We were utter silence in the courtroom. Not guilty. Not guilty. And he's been pulled out of that. He had been asked to come out of the locker. He came and fell on my feet, and the lawyers. There was pandemonium in the church, because nobody had done that. And when we were driving back, he told me, "You saved my life. I will do anything for your rest of your life." He's very closer to me now. But I have to go through 2 years. God tested me. It's okay to pray for somebody. It's okay to go and meet them. It's okay to go with them. But how many of us are prepared to journey with them for a considerable period of time, and you will not know the outcome? Because you know what? It would have happened. He would have gone for 10 years. His family would have been scattered. And he came later and told me, "I didn't tell you because you would have judged me." That's what I told the lawyers about my whole story. Jesus showed unusual kindness to all who came into contact with, from the sinners to the tax collectors. It is strange. Kindness mentioned only 200 times, or more than that in the Bible. But unusual kindness is only mentioned on Act 28:2. 2 Samuel 9:3, there was an interesting thing. King David did something for his friend's sake, Jonathan. Jonathan is Saul's son. He was his good friend, and he virtually loyal to him. And that's why he gave his tunic, and he gave his sword, and he gave everything to him, because Jonathan was a successor. He should have been the successor to Saul. But Jonathan knew in his heart, David is going to be there. But David, because of that friendship, wanted to show something. He wanted to do something for the Saul's household. So he's asking this question. He's asking Ziba. Ziba is the servant at Saul's place, and he's asking, Ziba, the servant of Saul, "Is there anyone still in the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" That's, if you look at the scripture, God's kindness. God's kindness is unusual kindness. That's the kindness. You know why? Because he wanted to do something for the sake of Jonathan. But you know what happens? Mephibosheth is lame in both legs, and he has to be carried to the king's place, and he ended up at the king's table for the rest of the life. You know what? That was an act worth remembering. Sometimes in the journey of life, you and I have to carry people. People have carried me in my life. So it's your responsibility. Some of you are carrying some people in your life today. You know who you are. So at the end, you and I give account to God. God honors you for what you have done. Unusual kindness means we not only have to show love and compassion, but at times we have to carry them. What sort of kindness we portray in our lives? Is just kindness or unusual kindness? The second thing I want to touch on is God reveals his plan only at the end. We will never understand God's plan and purpose for our life. Isaiah 55:8 says, "My thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways." In John 13, Jesus wrapped a towel around his waist and started washing the feet of his disciples. When he came to Simon Peter, Peter asked a very pertinent question from Jesus. "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You don't realize now, Simon, what I am doing, but later you will understand." Simon didn't know that Jesus is going to be going back to the Father in a couple of hours. So this morning, we will never know what God's plan for you and me. Author Benjamin Watson wrote a very inspiring book with a title, "I know God has a plan for me, but I don't know what it is." Have you seen a title like that? I know God's plan. So you will read the book saying that there's something there to plan for you. But he said, I don't know what it is. You know, I look back at my life when I was preparing this message. You know, I never wanted to come here. In the first place, I never wanted to come because I had some involvements there. Because of mother's situation, I had to put my papers. My mother never made it. So my wife was very keen. Why? Because I was a Hindu at that time, and I was taking her from one temple to another temple. So she was very keen on going overseas. So what happened? My brother sponsored. I landed in Brisbane. Within 2 weeks, I told him, this is not the ideal place. We'll move. So I rang my cousin from Canberra. He came and picked me up. So my wife says, why? Your brother said he has a house. You can stay there. No. You mustn't live closest to your siblings, you see. That's the excuse I said. So she said, okay. So my daughter came and asked me, Dad, the uncle is there. He will help you out. No. I'm an independent person. I will find my way. Came to Canberra. And that guy said, okay, Shan, how are you? My plan is not to stay here. So I would drag my wife and children from one place to another. So after a couple of months in Canberra, I said, I think I'll go and see what's happening in Sydney. I went to Sydney and came. So the places I visit, Brisbane, Canberra, Sydney. And then she said, what about Melbourne? So the only two places I haven't visited, Melbourne and Perth. So I came to Melbourne, but I applied for a job. I didn't want the job. I just applied for a job. And I came, and they had an interview. Those days, over the phone, they will ask you. So finished the interview, came back. So she said, what's happening? I said, I'm not getting a job here. I think it's better to pack up and go. So then my cousin from here, Melbourne, rang and said, Shan, there's a telegram for you. You know, good old days, I don't know. I thought telegram I thought somebody, in Sri Lanka, you get a telegram and somebody passes away. So I thought somebody, he said, open the telegram and see, somebody must have passed away. Then he said, no, you got the job. My wife was hearing from the other side, well, thank God. I said, I don't know what type of job, I must go and see. I don't know. So I came here. I came here in June 1989. 2 weeks later, I was in a basketball coach in Harrisfield Primary School. Calvary Worship Center where I started. You know, you will never understand what's God's plan. My life was changed dramatically. From a erstwhile sinner, and I still struggle with it. And the things I have done to the family, I was dragging from place to place. I had to give account to God. This morning, that's what I had to tell. Sometimes you don't understand what's God's plan and purpose. I come all the way. I want to go back. But God put his hand on you, you will never get out of it. I don't know what's God's plan for you, but just hang in there. He has greater things to do through you. You might be going through some struggles today, but God is in the midst of your troubles. Just leave it, I can go on and on about my life. I learned some vital principles from Paul's life. In spite of his challenges and the difficult circumstances he was in, he continued to serve others and did it willingly. That's Apostle Paul. In Acts 20, 34, 35, he was addressing the Ephesian elders or Ephesian church. Probably that's his farewell message Paul was addressing. And encouraging them with these words. Acts 20, 34. You yourself know that these hands of mine have supplied my own needs and the needs of my companions. In everything I did, I showed you that by kind of hard work, we must help the weak, remembering the words the Lord Jesus himself said, it is more blessed to be given than to receive, as Pastor Andrew said today. Paul studied law under Gamaliel. He was a prominent member of the Sanhedrin, the religious body. He could have picked up, in today's context, a CEO job somewhere. He was such an educated guy. He had wealth and everything. But when Jesus touched his life on the way to Damascus, his life transformed and changed. He became a true servant of God. Here we see in Acts 28, in verse 3, picking up some tree branches, brushwood or something like that, and putting it onto the fire to keep the fire burning because of the cold weather at that time in Malta. He could have got someone else to do it. Paul was such a prominent member, he could have said, mate, you better do it. I want to stand back and wait. Sometimes we do the things. We want others to do the hard work, and we want to just watch and see. But what did Paul do? He was doing the work what God wants him to do. This is what Pastor David and Pastor Andrew and some others doing. You are leading from the front. That's what Paul did, leading from the front. Here we see in Acts chapter 28, 3, picking up some tree branches and putting it onto the fire. He saw something strange happening. There was a snake bitten him and clinging onto his hand. Serving God and people will not exempt us from our day-to-day challenges. Paul thought he could relax in the island for some time, but continuing the journey to Rome, at that instant, Paul was bitten by the snake. The Maltese people who were with him at that time, who extended a warm reception, now turning against him, saying that he was a murderer. This is because of their superstitious belief. Because their pagan background, so they believed that he's a god. These cultural things are still prevalent in places like Sri Lanka. How do I know I'm from the north of Sri Lanka? Because I remember my brother's wedding, and people were there. They didn't allow my mother to come into the front because she was a widow. So I fought hard for it. They said, no, it's a bad omen. These are the things sometimes prevail, not only here, in those countries too. The islanders expected Paul to die immediately because of the vicious venom of the snake. But what happened next was Paul just shook the snake off the fire and continued to work as if though nothing had happened. Now seeing this, the islanders were in a state of shock and unbelief and formed the impression that this man was God. Paul and Barnabas experienced the same thing as Lystra. When Paul healed a lame man, they came and said, these fellows are God in the form of human being. And Paul fought it and they said, no, we are just human beings. And Paul got into a fight and then, of course, they rescued him. But here, Paul was keeping quiet. I think he learned a bitter lesson there, so he didn't say a thing here. Listen to me carefully. We are always quick to judge people by looking into their circumstances with our naked eyes. When they are facing some difficult situations in life, the Word of God says, judge not, you will be judged. I have asked forgiveness from God for judging people several times. The other observation here is, challenges will continue to come one after the other, and like Paul, shake it off and put it into the fire. What did Paul do? He just took the snake and put it into the fire. And he kept on working. He didn't worry much about it. He didn't say, well, the snake was, he didn't create a drama there. The snake perished in the fire. When they put the snake perished in the fire. Likewise, ask the Holy Spirit to rekindle the fire in your life to burn off the challenges of life. When God is with you, nobody can be against you. Psalm 34:19 says, afflictions of the righteous are many, but God has delivered us from all of them. This incident of Paul and the snake would have spread across the entire island. And as a result, Paul and his group got an invitation from the chief officer called Publius, probably the top man in the island. He would have just kept quiet all this time because he had a big estate. He didn't want to entertain because the 276 fellows are here. But when he heard what Paul did, he thought, oh, this guy must be special. Let me extend an invitation. This is what sometimes we do. We know we can get something out of somebody, we extend an invitation to those people. So Publius is not an exception. He has extended the invitation. But there Paul had the opportunity to minister and heal the father of the chief officer. After this, all the sick people in the island came to him and were healed. Jesus had empowered Paul. Likewise, the Spirit of God vested in us will empower us, but I and you have the steadfast faith to unction it. Paul and fellow prisoners and others never intended to travel to Malta. The original travel plan to go along the coast into Macedonia and to take the land route to Rome. But God had other plans. According to Luke, who was a physician and co-traveler, the infectious disease that prevailed at that time in the island did not have a permanent cure. You know, if Paul wouldn't have been there, none of those people would have survived. But God used that time because God sent him for a purpose. Even though he was shipwrecked and went to Malta, God has a purpose. He wouldn't have known from the beginning that he was going to Malta because it was not in the agenda. But God performed a miracle through Paul. Some historical records say Publius became a Christian and established a church. In all, God never revealed the plan to Paul at the outset. But only at the end, Paul realized the shipwreck and the subsequent events was a divine plan to touch the lives of the Maltese islanders. What is the story speaking to us? Through every challenge, struggles, and obstacles, God has a master plan for our lives. He will only reveal it at the end. Finally, God purposes to bring encouragement to those who trust him. Acts 28:10, Luke says, they honored us in many ways, and we were ready to sail. They furnished us with the supplies we needed. There were several reasons for Paul to get encouraged in this story. When they were shipwrecked with 276 survivors and reached the shores of Malta, they lost all their belongings except the clothes they were wearing. Here we see the islanders providing supplies they needed for their journey to Rome. They were not only received well by the islanders, but the chief official of the island, Publius, provided them with comfortable environment for 3 days in his home, bestowed them with generous hospitality. This refreshed and lifted the spirits of Paul and his fellow people to resume the journey from Malta. God kept Paul for 3 months in Malta for 2 reasons. God wanted to use Paul to touch the lives of the islanders and to refresh him in ministry. Sometimes God permits us some time to stay at home because God knows we are tired. That's what's happening in Paul's life, to refresh him in his ministry. The other main reason is that they could not sail till the winter is over, because the sailing time there is late February to March. That's how after the winter is over. So God knows about it. The ideal sailing time opens after the winter in late February or early March, and the right time God provided the ship to sail. God is in control of our lives. He knows what is good for us. From the time they left the shores of Malta, they had great reception along the way from everyone whom Paul had visited, and some have traveled a great length of time to meet him. Even though God has promised that Paul would land safely in Rome, Paul would have had his apprehensions about the reception because he was going as a prisoner. This is why Paul thanked God for his divine favor. As believers, time and again, we will face challenges, but one thing is assured: God will always dare to strengthen us and encourage us in our journey of life, provided we put our trust and hope in him. The other important thing is why Paul was encouraged and excited, because he had a heart desire to visit Rome. Acts 19:22, because he wanted to go to Rome, because to encourage the believers in their journey and to touch lives and to proclaim the good news. From the beginning of the sea voyage, God provided Paul with the right companion to support and encourage him. There's some profound truth here. If you have a desire to serve God, God will fulfill that desire in your heart. Sometimes we want to do things, but on the surface level. But if you have desire in your heart, God will fulfill. I remember about 14 or 15 years ago, when Pastor David said, I want to go to Pakistan. And I don't say anything to Pastor David. I said, yes. I just nodded my head and went. Because my impression was Pakistan is a Muslim country, and how is he going to go? And you know Pastor David, if he says he's going, that's it. Nobody can stop him. But then he had a desire in his heart to go to Pakistan. They had challenges. Because last year they visited, both of them had COVID. And I remember, I didn't want to ring Pastor David. He rang and said, I have COVID. So I thought, oh yes, sir, don't worry, we are praying for you, So, yeah. So I thought I'll ring Pastor Andrew and see how it is. Oh yes, Uncle Shan, just a little, it's cough and all these things. We are getting a certificate, we'll be out. How you look at the problems, how you look at the things. Challenges will be there, but God will, Paul is going to Rome as a prisoner. He never thought he wanted to visit Rome, but God is taking me as a prisoner. But yet, as Pastor Andrew said, he was ministering in a place. He was in a house arrest. He was ministering. I don't think none of us will do that. That's Paul. Luke the writer and Aristarchus, a fellow worker volunteered to join Paul on his journey. You know, these two guys volunteered to go because some of these people in that ship were prisoners. But Aristarchus was a co-worker with Paul, and he told him, I'm coming. Why? He wanted to supper. Just imagine somebody is going as a prisoner, you would like to accompany? No. And Luke, the writer, he was willing to. He was staying in chapter 27, we planned to go. So, Luke is another thing, if you really look at Luke, and in Caesarea, when Paul was in the prison, Luke rented a house and lived close by. Because to be a support to them, you need to have friends like that. Paul didn't invite these guys to come along in that. They volunteered to go. So what is God doing here? They are providing friends who are loyal and trustworthy in your journey. As long as you are committed to the cause of Christ, He will give you the right people to journey with you. In summing up, I want to leave some thoughts to encourage you this morning. God has a plan and purpose for your life and my life, and He'll come to fruition at the chosen time. Challenges are going to be there, and His divine favor will sustain you, but have the steadfast faith and trust in Him. I'll leave this verse. Isaiah 40:31 says, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Let us pray and want the worship team to just come. And I know I looked at Paul's life and, I was very encouraged. Because I'm going through some challenging times in my life. And when I looked at his life and when I was go deeper and deeper, here is a guy who was well placed in life, but he gave his life to Christ and is facing challenges. Sometimes some of us are like that. We are given the life to Christ and challenges will come. But God has a greater plan for your life. Whatever you are going through, I don't know today. But one thing is certain, God is going to take you from strength to strength. God is going to take you from strength to strength. And He is in total control of your life. And nothing is impossible. He will not leave you. He will not fail you. That's the word as we sing the last song. Yeah. And just look to God today. You know what? The words are very, very encouraging to me. I was just listening to the word when I spoke to Midhu, and I was listening to that and I said, God, it's my story. I don't know about you. It's my story. And I was encouraged. I know God is, through all the challenges, I was talking about, challenges are come to glorify God. Every event happens in your life and my life is a testimony to glorify God. You will be broken. You will be shaken. You will be rattled. But God is glorified. God is there to carry you through. I don't know how I got the strength to be here this morning. But God gave me the strength. His sustaining strength. Because they said, His strength is made weakness, made perfect in our weakness. God's strength is. So let us look to God today as we listen to this. Hallelujah. Thank you.
Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand when everything around me is shaken. I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus. He's never let me down. He's faithful through generations.
life. You are in total control. Father, I pray for everyone who's watching this program and who are here today. They are going through some challenging times, but the word from God is, I will fail you. I will not fail you. God will see you through the challenging times. I pray your blessing upon your people as they go from here, knowing God will never fail you. Thank you once again for the word. Thank you. We stirred up our hearts. Thank you. Looking at the life of Paul, God, you taught us some fundamentals. You taught us about servanthood. In spite of all the struggles, Paul was serving you. Give us the strength, the sustaining strength to serve you, God, because you gave us the mere breath. We are breathing today because your breath is the one.
Yes.
So whatever can minister us as we go our way, let us know God is in the midst of you. God has gone before you. We ask this in your precious and mighty name. Amen and amen. Thank you.
Christ